This is Prime's Smart Arm, a rack attachment that promises to replace several commercial machines. It's a leg extension, lying leg curl, bicep curl with a few options, tricep extension, ab crunch machine, and back extension. But wait, there's more. You can fine-tune the resistance curve of any exercise just by changing where you load the plates on Prime's torque arm, or you can hook it up to your weight stack. I've tested this on Rogue, Rep, and other cable systems, and it worked well on all of them. And if you've got unlimited money, you could even attach a Vultra to it. After using this for a few months, I have to admit, for the right person, this thing's exceptional. But it's definitely not for everyone. It's got its trade-offs, and I'm not just talking about the price. We're gonna break down what this thing actually is, what you need to make it work, what it does well and not so well, and we'll make some comparisons to Bulletproof's Isolator, which is essentially its only competition. Having used the Isolator for a few years now, I'll admit I wasn't exactly excited about setting the Smart Arm up at first, especially since I think this is the first piece of equipment I've ever gotten that's come with an instruction manual, and I've never felt like more of a home gym nerd than when reading it. But setup is a little more streamlined and simpler than it may look because regardless of the exercise, the Smart Arm's position on the rack never changes. Although there's technically nothing stopping you from moving it around and experimenting to see what other exercises you can do with it, and I have found quite a few others that work well. Really, the only time I've used the manual was to reference the positioning diagrams, which are super helpful to have. Although after using it for a while, I don't really look at them anymore. To switch between movements, you're basically swapping the attachment that's on the arm, adjusting the positioning of the cam, or moving around and setting up the bench. But enough of that YouTube editing magic. Let me show you what installing it really looks like. All right, I've pulled it off the rack and thrown everything on the ground to make things more realistic, because even though I have and like Prime storage options for this, reality is, as a man, I'm really bad at cleaning things up and putting them away. The Smart Arm itself consists of three parts: the base, the torque arm, and the attachment, the leg roller being the one that it comes with. That's what you get if you buy this. Any of the other attachments you buy separately a la carte, which is where that price can really start climbing, especially if you also need their shorty bench. But that's not a problem for you since you're a longtime subscriber and already saved 5% at Prime by using code Gluck to pick one up after our review. And then your amazing judgment skills were justified when I called it one of my favorite benches ever during our huge bench showdown. As we go through everything, I'll talk you through all the attachments and tell you which ones I think are worthwhile. The base weighs almost 50 pounds, so it's not light. And even though Prime put a handle on it, there's no great way to grab it, so it can be a little awkward to install on the rack. Luckily, it installs about 35 inches up from the floor, so once you find the right hole for you, you'll just keep putting it in the same one every time. There's a nut that you're supposed to use to clamp the arm down so it's really locked onto your rack and it doesn't move, but I rarely use it. Not because of these junky rubber covers they use, they tend to just fall off all the time, but because it already sits on here pretty well to begin with, and Prime includes shims you can install on the base to compensate for the differences between metric and American-made racks. And because of those, the Smart Arm fits very well on every 3x3 rack with 1-inch holes and 2-inch hole spacing that I've tried it on. Step 2 is to install the torque arm. So it just kind of slides into this tube here, and then that pop pin locks it into position. Then you got to put your attachment on. So I guess we'll do the leg roller, but it doesn't really matter which one you pick. They all install the same way. Remove the pin, slide it into position, and then just lock it down. And I guess we should do the counterweight next. The counterweight helps balance the attachment, making it easier to adjust as well as easier to get into and out of position on the machine. It also smooths out the resistance curve some, otherwise it would be heavier at the start of the movement. Admittedly, I do tend to forget to put it on a lot of the time because I'm just not used to having one on the Isolator, but it is a nice touch. And I say that having spent what really is an unhealthy amount of time verifying the resistance at various points, with and without the counterweight, while hooked up to cables, and with the plates on the various torque arm weight horns. If this whole process looks like a lot, I can typically get everything done in maybe about a minute, and then swapping between movements tends to be quicker than that. That's not me saying it's not a process, but when you compare it to the steps and parts involved with installing, removing, or adjusting the isolator, I find this to be simpler and quicker, especially considering it never changes positions on your rack, whereas the isolator does. In an ideal world, the smart arm, like the isolator, sits on its own upright, so you never have to remove and install it, but home gyms are rarely ideal. That being said, if Prime launches their offset single post for this that we saw at Home Gym Con, I'd be pretty tempted to find space for a dedicated setup. From here we throw whatever we need to on the bench, and we'll do lying leg curls because it's the closest attachment. So I'm just taking the leg curl attachment pad, popping it onto my bench, and then I roll the bench into position, and essentially I'm lining up my pivot point with this axis of rotation, which they gave us this cute little sticker for. They do have a bench locator that's designed to help with this, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. In this case, my knees are going to be right at the end of the pad, so that's where I place the bench, and then I just adjust the cam to my starting position, so we'll say there, and then you load your weight, whether it's Olympic-sized plates or you want to clip into a weight stack. The Smart Arm does lying leg curls very well. The padding, additional width, and angle provided by the leg curl attachment make it comfortable even when loaded up with a good amount of weight. The range of motion is great. The length is easily adjustable, making it work for people of different sizes. And getting into and out of position is about as awkward as any other lying leg curl machine, except at home, your husband's the only one staring at you. So even though the leg curl attachment is only used for leg curls, I'd still get it with the Smart Arm. I'd say the Smart Arm almost borders on overbuilt. It's robust and solid, which is good because it doesn't deflect or move around under heavy loads. That's not to say there's not some movement here. There's a lot of moving parts, but it has a lot less play between components than I'd have thought. I did test the Smart Arm with different benches for every single exercise, and this is one where I'll say it'll work but won't be nearly as comfortable. The entire system really was engineered around the shorty bench, so while I'm not saying you can't make it work for some movements, reality is you really need this bench to fully utilize the Smart Arm. All right, let's talk about the torque arm because it really is one of the coolest features of this thing. This is the same thing Prime's been using on their plate-loaded commercial gym machines for years. It allows you to quickly and easily change the resistance profile of an exercise. So let's say you want more resistance at the start of the movement, you load weight on the top horn. If you want resistance throughout the movement, you load the middle. Think of the middle as basically how every other plate-loaded device works, and the bottom horn gives you more resistance at the end of the movement. You can, of course, also use multiple horns at the same time. This is one of those things that once you use it, you'll wonder why everyone else isn't trying to figure out how to integrate the same thing into their machines. It's intuitive, simple, and works really well, which probably is exactly why Bulletproof is literally trying to do the same thing with their isolator and their multi-weight horn. If that's not enough for you, I've even managed to hook it up to my Voltra, further allowing me to tweak the resistance curve, add weight to the eccentric, or whatever. I mean, if you're already spending this kind of money, then why not just use our affiliate link and double the cost? I'm joking, obviously. I just wanted to show you you could integrate a Voltra, but the torque arm works so well, I doubt I'd ever bother linking the two. It's still cool that you can though. All right, let's switch over to leg extensions, and so you can get an authentic feel for how this works. We'll do this one together too. So I'm gonna pop on the leg extension seat. And then since I have the full gamut of attachments, I'll pop on the back pad as well. One of the things I love about the Shorty is that installing and removing attachments is quick and easy, making setup a little quicker for this. Now I just have to pretend I know what I'm doing. I need to drop the bench down to 20 degrees. You don't have to move it, it's already in position. And then you hop on. You can adjust the length here depending on your build. Tighten that down if you want. And then just pop this to get yourself into position and you're good to go. I've got handles to hold on to, an adjustable back support, and to be honest, this feels really good to use. It's comfortable, and I say that having tested a lot of machines, including Prime's own leg extension leg curl combo machine, which is often thought of as one of the best commercial options on the market. I gotta say, if we're comparing this to bench attachments, which I tested a ton of, or rack attachments like the Isolator, the Smart Arm is the closest to emulating the fit, finish, and feel of commercial machines, and it's not a close race. It's very good when it comes to leg exercises. Of course, it comes with the caveats of this being much more expensive than a bench attachment. It takes up more space, and when compared to a bench attachment, the setup is obviously more involved. You can save a good amount by not buying Prime's back pad, which for some reason is their most expensive Smart Arm add-on. Don't get me wrong, it works well. I'm glad I have it. I'm just not sure why it costs so much, especially if you also need the rails to install it on if you don't already have them. Another place you can save money is with the bench locator. It's supposed to help you line up the bench so that setup is a little quicker, but unless you have one of Prime's Prodigy racks, it borders on useless because it was designed to be attached to the front of those racks, and for whatever reason, their front feet use 1/2-inch holes and non-standard hole spacing rather than the 1-inch holes and 2-inch hole spacing that most other modern 3x3 1-inch racks use. Rather than use it, I was using a piece of tape to help me align things, but after my toddler pulled that up, I decided it wasn't that hard to line up, so I just skip it and save the $150. But this is Prime Fitness we're talking about. As funny as it would be to tell you getting this could save you thousands of dollars versus having all the standalone commercial machines it replaces, sure, there is some truth there. Their plate-loaded leg extension leg curl combo costs $4,500 before shipping, and yes, it will save you space versus all those pieces, which is why it appeals to me, but you're probably not buying Prime because you're budget shopping. As an American-made brand, they've made a name for themselves by making some of the best equipment there is, and the Smart Arm is no exception. The build quality and attention to detail is fantastic outside of a few little quirks, like it would be nice if they numbered the cam here to make it easier to remember your positions, but that's honestly probably a nitpick at best. I should note though that the original launch of the Smart Arm had a few issues that Prime quickly addressed. Things like the plates on the third weight horn hitting the upright, which no longer happens, and they changed the counterweight washer because some plates didn't fit on it. It is nice to see them quickly adapt and listen to the community, although had I bought one of those first few units, I'm not sure how happy I'd be, which is maybe why you should press subscribe and wait on my review before buying anything. All right, what about the other things you can do with the Smart Arm? We haven't even talked about bicep curls yet, which is frankly offensive on this channel, and that's why we picked up both the rotating and strap handles. Because who cares what it costs when we're talking about the size of your arms? I've mentioned commercial gym machines a few times in this video, and that's not only because the Smart Arm is designed to replace a few of them, but also because when we went to Home Gym Con, we had to work out at a commercial gym, and it honestly made me miss having so many machines at my disposal. It also showed me just how well Prime has dialed this in, because curls on this with the fixed arm curl attachment legitimately feels better than any of the machines I tried. The arms pivot independently and the handles spin as well, making the whole thing feel really smooth. The padding on the Shorty Bench's preacher pad attachment is comfortable. That is another attachment you need to make this movement work, by the way. I do think they probably could have found a way to combine the adjustable curl attachment, which allows you to strap different handles onto it, and the fixed arm curl like Bulletproof does with the isolator, as that would save us a little bit of money since you're not potentially buying 2 bars, and it would make for one less thing to store. You can also spin the bench around and use it as a tricep extension machine for abdominal crunches and for back extensions. Admittedly, those aren't movements I do regularly in my home gym training, but then again, I haven't really had a way to. You may also need additional accessories to make them work. For example, tricep extensions requires the tricep attachment and the preacher pad, but I mean, you were always buying the preacher pad anyway because, you know, curls. Tricep extensions work well, but it's hard to use much weight on them because there's no back support, so it can really start feeling like a bit of a core workout. For ab crunches, you need to get the Shorty's decline attachment to lock your feet in. Ab crunches work well, but it's not a movement I'd personally buy the Smart Arm for, although then again, the entire point of this thing is that it emulates several machines, so maybe that's a dumb thing to say, which would be on brand for me. It's the same thing I'd say about back extensions. You would have already picked up the leg extension seat, so it's not going to hurt your wallet to give the movement a try. I think the best way for me to explain the Smart Arm is for a guy who doesn't have a ton of time to work out, since my needy kids always want my attention for some reason, the trade-offs are worth it to me. Yes, there's some setup time. Of course, there's a bit of a learning curve, and you've got to store all the parts, be it on a shelf or using prime storage options, but if you can afford it, this thing is really good. That is a big if though. I bought this bench and all the attachments myself, so I get it. This stuff isn't cheap, although full disclosure, I have to give Prime props because they sent us the Smart Arm for review, and I'll be the first to admit I'm not sure I could justify the entire purchase otherwise. The arm itself costs $1,250, although code Gluck does save you money on it and all the attachments, and then depending on which add-ons you purchase, that price can really balloon into the thousands, especially if you also need the Shorty Bench. The isolator, for comparison's sake, costs around $1,100 shipped, and although its price can also soar as you start adding on to it, there's no denying it's the cheaper option, and with Bulletproof constantly iterating and adding on to it, it's easily the more versatile of the two as well. The only problem is, for many people, the isolator can be very intimidating to set up and figure out, so a lot of people end up just using it for a few movements. And I think the Smart Arm, even though it does less, the things it does better. I'm really impressed with it. Let me know what you think though, and thank you so much to our Patreons for helping us to make content like this, and thanks for watching.